Welcome back to another video. Good to see you. In the next couple of days I'm flying to Tasmania. So at the moment I'm just going through some of the planning. What gear I'm going to take and how I'm actually going to travel with that gear across to Tasmania. So I thought I'd put together this little video on how I've organised myself and my gear and share some tips along the way. This video is sponsored by Squarespace. If you need a website, a domain or an online store, make your next move with Squarespace. Shout out to Miguel. You'll often find him in the comments. He's a big supporter of the channel. He contacted me a couple of weeks ago and he said he was about to prepare for his own trip and he thought the process of preparing for a trip as a landscape photographer would make really good content for a video. So thanks Miguel for the inspiration and the idea. If anybody else has their own idea about a topic they'd like me to cover in a video, share it in the comments below. I'd love to know about it. So I'm going to start the video talking a little bit about planning and then we'll finish with how I pack my gear and travel with it. So put simply, planning generally covers where you're going to go, what you're going to shoot and what gear you need to bring with you. Before I start planning and making decisions about my gear, I need a bunch of information. So we're going to start off with the easy stuff, like how long am I going to go for? What's the main purpose of the trip? This gives me an idea of how many opportunities I might have while I'm away. It might be just a short trip, so I might not get too many opportunities. Or the main purpose of the trip might be for a family holiday or work, in which case primarily I'll be busy at meetings or hanging out with the family. So that reduces my opportunities to take the camera out. But in this case, when I'm going across to Tassie with a couple of mates, it's all about landscape photography. So I'll have plenty of opportunities. If you're actually limited for time, then planning is even more important because you want to make the most of the time that you've got and you certainly don't want to be carrying around any unnecessary gear. So the first thing I look at is the conditions that I'll be shooting under. If I'm not familiar with the area, I'll look up the general climate and check out the general temperature ranges and rainfall that I might be expecting. This is helpful for mainly two reasons. One, it's probably going to impact the sorts of landscape images that I'm going to be taking, and it also helps me work out what clothing to bring. Landscape photography at the best of times can be fairly challenging, but if you're uncomfortable, it's going to make it even harder. You're going to get tired, you're not going to feel as creative, and you won't want to be out in the elements for as long. So be prepared. Closer to the day I leave, around about a week out, I start looking at the weather forecast for the location and try and work out the best days to organise a landscape shoot. Again, typically I'm looking at temperature and rainfall, but I'm also interested in how windy it's going to be and the sunrise and sunset times. If I'm going for a seascape, so headed out to the coast, I'll also keep an eye on the tides. The other thing I also want is a little bit of cloud, and to work out what sort of cloud to expect, I use a site called skippysky.com.au. It's an Australian site, but it covers the world and it's absolutely brilliant. It lets me know how much low, middle and high cloud to expect. I'll add a link to the website in the description below. If it's your first time to the location, then do a little bit of research. Google the area and see what opportunities there might be for capturing landscape images. You never know, you might even find an image or two that will spark some inspiration. Other things that I've found helpful when trying to research an area are things like Trover, Flickr and Instagram, plus other social channels. For Iceland, I grabbed this map here that's especially made for landscape photographers. It's called the International Photographer and it highlights on the map all the areas that are really interesting and have good potential for landscape images. When I travelled to the UK, I picked up a couple of books like this one here of the Peak District. Same sort of thing. It just highlighted a couple of places that I wanted to make sure that I wanted to visit while I was over there. Another great way of finding out more about a location you haven't been to is to connect with photographers online who are from that area or that you know have visited that area. The more information that you have about a location you haven't been to, the more prepared you'll be. This is particularly important if you're limited on time. With the times worked out, the conditions understood, and your locations sorted, you could argue that you could start planning. But I like to add one more thing to the mix, and that is to create myself a little project, to identify an aspect of my photography that I want to work on, I want to explore a little bit more, I want to focus on. When I went to Augusta earlier this year, I wanted to explore using the crop sensor, the APS-C sensor of the Fuji X-T2. So that was the only camera that I bought. You may decide on your next trip that you want to shoot more in the blue hour, so make plans to hang around after sunset. Well, you know you're going to be visiting some waterfalls, so you want to experiment with some shutter speeds, so you make sure you bring your filters. Not only will this help you improve your photography, but going through this thought process will help you work out what gear you need, and you'll be less likely to be leaving something behind. With all that information, we can now start prioritizing what gear we want to bring and start packing. So let's start with the main part of my gear, and that of course is the camera. The trip that I'm taking to Tasmania is predominantly a landscape trip, so I'm going to take the best landscape camera I own, and as most of you know, I've recently upgraded to the Nikon D850. It's a fantastic camera, full frame. Mounted to it, I have the L bracket from Sunway. It allows me to mount the camera landscape and portrait, and I can switch between the two quite easily, maintaining the sensor over the center of the tripod so I don't have to recompose. That's the beauty of an L bracket. A lot of people ask me what I use for a remote shutter, and I just simply use a generic wired remote. I know there are wireless ones and I've tried them to varying levels of success. The problem that I have is that you've got another battery to think about here. They're cheap. I got this one from eBay. It wouldn't have been more than 10 or 15 Australian dollars. And if I drop it in the ocean, I'll just replace it. So that's why I go with this one. Another question that I get quite often is, did I buy another one for the D850? And the answer is no. This is the one that I used on the D800. It would work on the D810 and it works fine on the D850. So when you've worked out what sort of landscape images you're probably going to be shooting, you can then start to decide what sort of lenses you should be taking. In Tasmania, there's going to be a range of landscapes we're going to be able to find there, from mountains, lakes, rivers, waterfalls, and even some seascapes, hopefully, along the coast. So as a result, I'll be taking my main three lenses, which is the 17-35, the 24-70, and the 70-200. I could talk about different lenses for different landscapes for an entire video, but instead what I'll do is I'll direct you to a video made by a mate of mine, Adam, over at First Man Photography. I'll link the description up here. And he talks through the trinity of lenses, which are very similar to the Nikon. He uses Canon over there. He talks about different lenses for different styles and different landscapes. But to summarize, I'll be taking the 17-35 for those wider vistas, particularly helpful around seascapes. I'll also be taking my 24-70mm lens, pretty much because this is currently the lens that I go to for many of my landscapes. The other lens that I'll be taking is the 70-200. This is large and heavy, and it's probably going to be the first lens that goes if I struggle for weight when I start packing. But this lens is very helpful when you're wanting to compress your scene or pick out details or smaller landscapes within a bigger landscape for a more intimate or abstract type of image. If I'm not able to bring this lens, what I'll do instead is I'll bring my 2x teleconverter. I'll stick that on the 24-70. That makes that lens into a pretty much the equivalent of a 50-140. The lens that won't be coming with me is my 14-24. I don't have filters for this lens, and I find that the 17-35 lens that I have is wide enough for most images that I want to take. Now onto filters. So let's start with the Lee Filters Foundation Kit. I've been using this for pretty much 8 years now, and I love Lee Filters. They've served me really well over the years. On the front, I've got screwed in the mount for the circular polarizer. That's the 105 Landscape CPL from Lee Filters. It's designed specifically for landscape lenses, particularly wide ones, because it reduces the vignetting right down to pretty much nothing. So it's a fantastic circular polarizer. Behind it, I've got slots for 2 more filters. And as far as they are concerned, I have this pouch here that was sent to me by Lee Filters, and inside I have a range of different filters. Most of them I've bought myself. I have the 0.3, 0.6 and 0.9 hard grad. I also have the 0.3, 0.6 and 0.9 soft grad, and I use them for different situations. I'll probably do a video about just filters another time. But Lee Filters has also sent me out a set of reverse grad filters. So I've got the 0.6, 0.9 and the 1.3 reverse grad. So I'm really keen to give them a go while I'm in Tasmania. So I use 2 other types of filters with my landscape images if I want to slow down the shutter speed. And that is my Lee Filter Little Stopper, which is a 6-stop ND filter, and the Big Stopper 10-stop ND filter. Lee Filters have kindly sent me out their Pro Glass filters for both of those configurations. Being glass, they give you a really clean image with minimal color shift. The blacks are really black and the whites are meant to be nice and crisp. So I'm looking forward to testing those out while I'm in Tasmania. So I'll be mounting the camera on my tripod. I use the Enduro as my main tripod, and it packs up nice and small. I've got the version where the legs fold up into 4 pieces so that I can actually take it as my travel tripod as well. The base is the CLT 204 and the head is the BHL2S. I find this combination nice and sturdy for the Nikon and all the lenses that I use. Packs up nice and small. It came with me to Iceland and the UK last year, and it'll be coming with me again to Tasmania. So essentially that's the main gear that I take for my landscapes. But of course I also vlog as well as take images. So let's talk about the vlogging gear that I take with me. To start off with, I'll be taking the Fuji X-T100 with the kit lens, the 15 to 45mm lens. That's a setup that I've recently started using, and I'm currently recording on that at the moment. On the top is mounted the Rode video mic, which is giving me some really good audio. I like the quality of that in the situations that I've used it in so far. But as a backup, I've also got a lav mic here that I've got plugged in to the Zoom H1. It's nice and light, and that'll be coming with me as backup audio. A recent addition to my vlogging kit is this light from Manfrotto. It's a 6 LED light, which has got a couple of different settings there. I used it for the first time in my astrophotography video that I did a month or 2 ago, and I find it really handy when the lighting conditions aren't ideal for video. The other camera that I sometimes take with me if I've got space is this Gopro. It's a GoPro Hero 5 that I picked up quite cheaply. Just gives me that option to take a few different interesting angles. As a tripod for my vlogging camera, I use the Joby 3K. It's nice, it's light, it's versatile. There's lots of vloggers that use the Joby Gorilla. I find it really helpful as well. While we're talking about tripods, the only other tripod, even though it's not a tripod, but I use this clamp, this GoPro clamp for the GoPro to be able to mount the GoPro in interesting locations for different types of footage. Speaking of interesting angles and interesting footage, the other device that I use for that, of course, is my Maverick Pro. This is a great little drone. I've had it for over a year. I got it when it first came out. If it wasn't so compact in its design and the way that it folds and it wasn't so light, I wouldn't be able to take it with me. But because I can fit it into my camera bag, this will be coming with me to Tasmania as well, along with the controller there. Again, nice and compact. A couple of sets of propellers. I've got batteries as well. I also bring a set of Polar Pro ND filters. This is the Vivid range. So it also has a circular polarizer in each of the filters that I use, cutting down the glare and making the footage nice and saturated and vivid. The ND part of the filters allows me to slow down the shutter speed so that I have that kind of filmic look, which is really important for that cinematic footage that I like to include in the videos that I create. Some of the other smaller items that I have in my bag are things like this head torch. This is a LED laser head torch that I've had for years. I've also got a backup light in this LED laser P7 torch as well. Handy for sunrises, sunsets, getting to a location, astrophotography. Really, really good to have a light and a backup light for that matter as well. I've got this old Leatherman that has a range of tools, and I use that to do running repairs on my gear, bag, camera, the mount, things like that. So that's also good. You can never have enough memory cards, and you can't be organized enough with those memory cards as well. So I've got a couple of these wallets. This one here is from Think Tank. It's got a couple of memory cards in there. I have a range from 16, 32 to 64. I like the idea of being able to swap out my memory cards and have images backed up on them, as well as on my external drives, which I'll talk about in a second. I've got a bunch of cleaning cloths. This one here is from Lee Filters, but I've got some other ones as well. You can never have enough cloths, so I have cleaning cloths in all the different bags that I have. I have one on me in my pocket usually, so that whenever I need a cleaning cloth, one is at hand conveniently. The other camera, of course, that I have with me is my iPhone, and it's not just used as a camera, but it's also used to find locations using Google Maps, as well as other apps like Pills to make sure that I know what the weather's like, tides, things like that. So that's never too far away from me. And I use this mount to mount the iPhone. This is from Glyph. I did a couple of videos with this around about Christmas time. I'll link them up here as well. Not only do I mount the iPhone for stills, but I also sometimes do time lapses as well. So that's quite convenient. As I said, this is from Glyph. I'll link it below. Other than that, we're pretty much getting on to clothing. So I always have a set of gloves if I'm going somewhere cold. A beanie's not too far away. You need to be comfortable when you're out in the elements. So let's move on to batteries. I'll have backup batteries for my Nikon. I'll have backup batteries for the Fuji vlogging camera. And of course, I'll have batteries also for the GoPro if I bring it. There are batteries here for the Maverick Pro. So for all these batteries that recharge, you've got to have some way of recharging them. So I bring the rechargers that plug into the 240 volt, but we're not actually staying in hotels while we're in Tasmania. We're going to be traveling around and sleeping in a van, and that's probably only going to have 12 volt recharging capabilities. We are bringing an inverter with us, but I also have these rechargers that plug into USB devices. So I'll have that with me to be able to recharge the battery for the D850 and the vlogging camera, as well as the GoPro. I've also got with me this power bank from Anker. This has been absolutely invaluable when I've been off the grid. This is a big power bank. It's 26,000 milliamp. It has a lot of power in it. I'm able to charge my iPhone 5 times. It has a dual input and also has 3 outputs. So not only can I charge the iPhone, but I can charge these batteries through these USB rechargers as well. One charging device that I have found helpful in the past is this Belkin 12 volt cigarette light charger. It has two USB adapters at the back and another two here, so I can be recharging 4 batteries or devices via USB that way, which is fantastic. It's really important to have a good backup strategy for both still and video. So what I do is I back up my videos and images twice to an external hard drive. I'm using this Samsung T3, it's a 500 gig external SSD, and I'm probably going to pick up another one before I leave as well, so I'll be backing up to that. And I also have my memory cards, as I said before, in a couple of wallets. And what I do is I back both my stills and videos twice to 2 different external drives, and then I leave my stills on the memory cards. I don't do that for video because the size of videos is too huge and I don't have enough memory cards to do that. But I've got them backed up twice, the images 3 times. To do my backups, I've got this NAR box that I've been using. And while this has been pretty reliable, I just can't bring myself to only take that. I also take my laptop as well, and I use my laptop to back up to the external drives as well. So there's a fair amount of gear that I've got with me, and I find it really important to be organized. So I use these bags. I use a range of bags of different sizes. This one here has all of my batteries that are charged up and ready to go, along with some cleaning cloths, a rocket blower, things like that. I've got another bag here that has usually all of my vlogging gear, dead cats, microphones, and I usually put one of the memory card wallets in here as well. I have another bag that I put all of the recharging cords in there. It's really well organized and I can grab a cord nicely and quickly and they don't get tangled up, so that's fantastic. I have another bag that has all of the recharges themselves inside, along with the 240 volt cords also. So in terms of gear, that's pretty much it. The only thing that I haven't mentioned is the camera bag that I'll be bringing. And that's this one. You've seen it before. It's the Teleconverter bag from F-Stop. It's a fantastic bag. I've had it for years. There isn't a perfect camera bag out there, but this is pretty close. And once this one eventually wears out and I need to replace it, I'm more than likely going to be replacing it with a similar sort of bag. I like it for a few different reasons. One of the main ones is you've just been taken through all of the gear that I take, and there's a fair amount of it, so it's fairly heavy. What this bag gives me is really good straps, a waist belt down the bottom here, and it also has a steel frame, so it means that all this gear I can carry on my back and hike for a day, and I still feel pretty good at the end of the day. That's one of the main reasons why I love this bag, that and also the camera compartment that I'm going to show you in a second. But it's the compromise of not going too light on my gear or not bringing a lens that I might want to bring. I know that I can carry all of it on my back with this bag and still feel pretty good at the end of the day. Inside the camera bag, of course, is this ICU, also from F-Stop. ICU stands for Internal Camera Unit. This is the extra large one. The flap folds back, and I have all of my gear set up in here, and this unit fits inside the camera bag. So when it comes to traveling with your gear, it's really important to make sure that you look up on the airline that you're traveling with what the restrictions are and what the guidelines are. You need to know weights in terms of check-in and carry-on luggage, and the restrictions regarding batteries and electronic devices. With most airlines around the world, carry-on is somewhere between 7 and 10 kilos, and what they require you to do is carry on all of the batteries and electronic devices. There's a few different options that I have. One is to Fill this ICU up with the batteries and electronic gear, remove it from the camera bag and take it on as carry-on, and then put my camera bag in my suitcase. The downside of that is that I lose space and weight by having my camera bag in my suitcase. Another option is to go minimalist and to have all of my camera gear in here, fill my camera bag with clothes and bits and pieces, and take a minimal approach to travel. That is usually suitable for 1 or 2 days, or if you're being really strict on the gear that you take, but I don't think I'm able to do landscape photography and vlog my adventures at the same time with such restrictions. So I'm going with a third option. That'll be to still fill the ICU with the batteries and electronic gear that I'm required, and I'm going to place that back into the camera bag itself. I'm going to use the camera bag as my carry-on bag. It's slightly oversized if filled, but if I reduce the size of it by taking out anything that I don't need to take on as carry-on and put it in my checked-in suitcase, I think I'm going to be fine. I'll have things like recharges, cables, and my tripod will all go into my suitcase, and this will just be for those items that I'm required to carry on. If you follow me on Instagram or Twitter, I'll let you know how that goes because I leave in a couple of days' time, and I'll give you an update through those channels. So that's everything. Now, I know that there's lots of photographers out there that have lots of experience traveling with their gear. So if there's any suggestions or tips and tricks that I may have missed, please add them to the comments below so that I and other viewers can benefit from your experience. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. If you haven't heard of Squarespace, you should check them out. They provide a platform that makes it really easy to build and maintain your own website. I've been using Squarespace for years, and not only do I find their platform simple to use, but they're a great company to deal with through their award-winning 24/7 customer service. They continue to improve their platform by adding features all the time, but I don't have to worry about rolling out any updates. Everything is taken care of. You can start your free trial at squarespace.com. If you do check them out and you want to go ahead with your website, make sure you go to squarespace.com/Andrew Marr to get 10% off your first purchase. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please give it a like below and share it with your friends. I'm going to have lots of videos coming up from the Tassie trip, so if you haven't already, please consider subscribing so you don't miss out on those. But until next time, guys, thanks very much for watching.